The 1 through 3 range in fantasy drafts in 2025 definitely offers different values in best ball versus redraft leagues. But I've done a lot of drafts from the 1 to 3 spot in both home redraft and best ball leagues, so I'm bringing to you today the best draft strategy for picks 1, 2, and 3 in 2025. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So the first thing, obviously, to go through to make sure we're all on the same page here is which platforms I will be covering in today's video. Now, today I'm going to be covering ESPN and Underdog. And obviously, if you're in an ESPN or a Yahoo redraft league, it's basically the same thing. Yahoo, there's some differences in values on players in ADP, but a lot of the same strategy is applicable from ESPN to Yahoo because they're both redraft formats. Whereas in best ball, it's usually different, right? It's a 3 wide receiver format on Underdog Best Ball, and it's just a much different style of playing because you do not have to set your lineup every week. There's no waiver wire attacks. There's no trades. Every single week, your best score is automatically logged by position. So especially at those back rounds, you're going to want to go for more big pop plays from a deep threat. Someone like an Adonai Mitchell in Indianapolis, for example, might be a good target there. Whereas in redraft leagues, you don't have any use to go for a guy like Adonai Mitchell. And I think the other really big thing to identify between the two different types of fantasy football is the roster lineup right here. Now, I'm going to stick with the traditional ESPN/Yahoo lineup, which is 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex, a defense, and a kicker. Now, again, this is the traditional way to play fantasy football. Whereas on Underdog, again, it's just different. Underdog, you have 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. And again, there's no roster maintenance throughout the season. There's no setting your lineup. There's no waiver wire. There's no trades. Your score is automatically logged by best score at each position on a weekly basis here. So what you would kind of take away from this here is that wide receivers are probably going to fly off the board at a much faster clip than in redraft leagues where it's 2 running back. And historically, what we've seen is the exact thing that you would think. Wide receivers in Underdog go historically way faster than running backs and way faster than they do in redraft leagues. Versus a redraft league, most of the time, running backs are going to fly off the board at a much faster rate than wide receivers. It might be closer to 2 to 1 running backs in redraft leagues, whereas in Underdog Best Ball leagues, probably historically has been closer to 3 to 1. Now, what we've seen, though, over the last several years, it's kind of cultivated into this year, which is really shocking. So in ESPN right now, the first 24 picks consist of 10 wide receivers and 11 running backs. I mean, that's a dead even split, basically, between wide receivers and running backs. Again, if you have not been playing fantasy football up until this point, this is really, really unusual here. Wide receivers definitely have been gaining traction in fantasy football drafts early on ESPN and on Yahoo, but this is definitely different type of stuff that we have not seen in years past. Now, you might think that Underdog, obviously being a 3 wide receiver format, is definitely still going to have the edge in wide receivers over running backs, and that is true, but not to the level you might think. Running backs and wide receivers on Underdog are also going at a very similar clip in the first 2 rounds. 13 wide receivers and 9 running backs in the first 2 rounds of Underdog drafts. This is the closest we've ever seen Underdog ADP and ESPN/Yahoo ADP. This is the closest trend we've ever seen. So what you could take away from that is this right here. Typically, historically, Underdog Best Ball draft strategy and redraft strategy, those two, you should not commingle those two. If you're doing both, you should definitely stick with a more Best Ball prime strategy than you should with a redraft strategy. And I'm not even saying that you should start commingling draft strategies here. But what I'm saying is you probably shouldn't be as scared of it as you were just 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They're very similar at this point as far as the ADP off the board. And in fantasy football in general, you should always be going for upside, regardless if you're at a best ball or a home redraft league. So I think that this year, since the spread is the closest we've ever seen between wide receivers and running backs in both redraft and best ball leagues, you can feel better about combining some of these strategies in Underdog versus a redraft league. But of course, none of it matters until you know who the targets are. So we're going to go through the first round right here, picks 1 through 3, and the players available on the board. And we're going to start out with ESPN. Now, what you see here is the players in order for who I'm most likely to take to least likely to take. And the rectangles on the side, they indicate my comfort level of taking those players. So the brighter the green, the more comfortable I feel about taking you. The darker the green, the less comfortable I'm about taking you. Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, they're both bright green for me. Jamar Chase for the obvious reason, he's my number 1 player in fantasy, as is most places. Bijan Robinson is my number 1 running back, although I would definitely prefer Jamar Chase at the 101 than I would with Bijan Robinson. And I don't think that anybody's going to disagree with me on that one here. And if you do, I would love to hear the argument. But Saquon Barkley is definitely my least favorite of the bunch here. And I'm not even saying he's a bad pick. But Saquon Barkley I've discussed a lot this offseason on this channel. What I've discussed with Saquon Barkley is that he's part of research that I've done over the offseason about running backs with 350 plus touch seasons in the regular season alone, not including playoffs where he had another 100 touches almost. Running backs who go into the next year after that big season, they either get injured or they lose volume to a significant amount. So Saquon Barkley's got a lot working against him, and I would rather go with the younger guy, Bijan, over the older guy, Saquon, who Bijan actually also was in that 350-plus touch category last year, so history is against him as well. But I'd rather take the shot on the younger running back with less of an injury history than I would with the older running back with more of an injury history. But Saquon, I still think, is a very viable pick at the 3 spot. Now, on underdog right here, it's a little different. There's one positional change. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb are my top 2. Again, since it is a 3 wide receiver format, I would tend to go with the wide receiver in the first 2 picks. Not only that, if it was Christian McCaffrey coming off a legendary season, I would take him at the 101 or the 102. But it's not the case this year. I feel much more comfortable picking CeeDee Lamb over Bijan Robinson because I think that CeeDee Lamb legitimately has wide receiver 1 upside. I think if Jamar is not the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, it will be CeeDee Lamb. So I think I'll just leave it at that. And then Bijan Robinson, for the reasons I explained, I like the age. I like the workload he's going to get. I think that he's going to be great. It's not really a matter of if I believe in the player or not. I definitely do. It's just that I prefer CeeDee Lamb over Bijan Robinson. Now, dropping down to rounds 2 and 3, the round 2 to 3 turn right here, that's going to be picks 22 through 27. So on ESPN right here, again, this is where I do like some of these players, but I definitely don't like some of them as much as I do in underdog, which you'll see just here in a little bit. Now, with Kyren Williams, Trey McBride, Drake London, they're all in bright green for me. I think Kyren Williams is a great pick in this range because I think Kyren Williams is a top 8 back in fantasy this year. And you can get him at a pretty good discount in ESPN drafts. Kyren Williams, there's really not much fear for me personally. The guy just signed a new contract. You know he's going to be the lead back in a good offense as long as Matt Stafford is healthy. Trey McBride, I think, is a very worthy tight end play. Now, I've gone through in a different video this offseason about how I love the elite tight end / elite quarterback strategy in 2025. Now, what you can kind of glean from that, from my perspective personally, is that with a quarterback or a tight end, in the first 2 to 3 rounds, if you can get a Brock Bowers, a Trey McBride, a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts, or a Lamar Jackson, you need to go with those guys because they will give you that positional edge. And that's how I feel about Trey McBride. I think he will give you a massive positional edge. I think he's got a great shot to finish at the tight end 1 in fantasy. He will get targets out the wazoo from Kyler Murray. And then Drake London here. I think that over T. Higgins, the next wide receiver available in this range, I think it's just definitely a better play to make. Drake London will easily be the wide receiver 1 in Atlanta. Not only the wide receiver 1, he'll lead the team in targets by at least 40 or 50. I mean, he's going to get targeted so much in this Michael Penix offense. I think Drake London, it's going to be hard to see him finish outside of the top 10. And then I've got Jaden Daniels in darker green and Bucky Irving in darker green as well. Kind of same category for me, where I feel like Jaden Daniels is a fine player, but I don't love him in the 2 to 3 turn. I think it's a little too early for me with Jaden Daniels. Not that I'm fearing a sophomore slump. I do think that Jaden will be a good player in fantasy this year, but I would just much rather target a guy like Jalen Hurts in a different range of the draft and a round later, because that's where you can get Jalen Hurts. Jaden Daniels, if he was going in the 4th round, I'd feel much better about taking. I just think you have to factor in opportunity cost right here, and Jaden Daniels doesn't, to me, fit the great opportunity cost spectrum. And then with Bucky Irving here, I've discussed my fear with him all offseason. I think with the new offensive coordinator, I get frightened when I hear him say things like Rachaad White is definitely the best, if not the best, one of the best receiving backs in the league. That indicates to me that Rachaad White will be involved in the receiving game. So Bucky Irving, I struggle to see getting 100% of the touches out of the backfield, basically. That's why I've got him lower ranked than consensus does. But I still do think if he hits really well. And as long as he's out there, he'll be really efficient. And I don't think he's a bad pick in this range. Whereas for me personally, on redraft format specifically, I'm not a big fan of T. Higgins. T. Higgins in this range is not in the red for me, but he's in this dark, really dark green to grayish range for me, to where I don't feel comfortable taking him in a redraft league this high. Listen, you have to remember the history of T. Higgins here. T. Higgins has always been a player where you do feel really good about starting him sometimes, and it pays off. Other times, you may feel good about starting him, and he disappears. And then other times, that might lead you to being like, well, can I play T. Higgins this week? And then you leave him on your bench, and he goes off. Like, T. Higgins, do not forget this. In redraft formats, he's trickier. He's definitely trickier to figure out and to feel confident about starting. So if we're talking best ball, which we will here in a second, I'm way more likely to take T. Higgins at cost this year than I am in an ESPN/Yahoo redraft league. And then we go to Underdog here. We've got a couple crossover targets in Underdog in this range. Josh Jacobs, to me, though, is the best target to make. I think Josh Jacobs is severely undervalued for the second year straight in fantasy. He is an auto draft for me basically every single time I'm in the 1 to 3 range in Underdog drafts. Chase Brown, not far behind. I think Chase Brown is excellent this year with tremendous upside. The only concern I have that I don't with Josh Jacobs with Chase is that you've got a third down back potentially that is not Chase Brown, possibly taking away some targets from him. And I don't think that it's going to come to an extreme amount, but I do think it's worth noting because Josh Jacobs really doesn't have that problem. Trey McBride, again, I love the pick here in an Underdog draft, just like I do in a redraft league. T. Higgins, again, way more likely to take him in an Underdog best ball draft because I don't have to make that weekly start-sit decision on T. Higgins in an Underdog best ball draft. But I would definitely pick him over a Marvin Harrison Jr., who I do think is also a solid pick in this range if you get him as your wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. as your wide receiver 1 is not as comfortable as T. Higgins. Because with T, I know he's got a great quarterback who will give him massive upside weeks. With Marvin, I'm not convinced of that. I think Marvin could be anywhere from a top 10 wide receiver to a top 30 wide receiver and finish in the same range as he did last year, which wasn't good, especially at cost. And he's going basically just a round later in drafts this year. This is not a great setup for Marvin this year. It's not like it's any different offensively for him. I just think that I'm taking a leap on the player he will become. But it makes me nervous, and I will definitely take T over Marvin. And I'm out on Tyreek Hill. If you've been with me this offseason, this should not come as a surprise. I have been off Tyreek Hill from day one of the offseason, and I've been all over Jalen Waddle at cost during the offseason as well. I think Tyreek Hill in this range is so not worth it. It's such an overdraft to me. I think he's going to be a disaster this year. He's trending very similar to how Antonio Brown trended at the end of his career. It's been a bad offseason. I've done research about wide receivers hitting the age cliff, and it would indicate every measure that Tyreek Hill has indeed hit the age cliff. And whether or not it's performance-based, it doesn't matter. The likelihood that he returns as a top 12 wide receiver at this point is very, very low, though. But if you do want to get into an Underdog best ball draft, Underdog is offering something awesome right now. You could go down there in the comments, and there's a link there to go to Underdog, and you can use code FFR to sign up. And they'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus credits. They will throw free money right in your face to go get in on these underdog drafts in 2025. I won $19,000 playing underdog best ball last year, so I think you should give yourself a shot and win the big money and have a good time doing it, because at the end of the day, that's what fantasy football is all about. Now, at the round 4 to 5 turn right here, you've got to wait a while, obviously. Picks 46 through 51 is our next pick range up. Now, in ESPN, I actually think that Xavier Worthy is the best pick in this range. And it's not because I love Worthy in a redraft league. Like, I like him, but I don't love him. I don't like this range in ESPN drafts. And I kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the video, which is I have more discomfort in this range in an ESPN/Yahoo redraft format. Xavier Worthy, I do think, without Rashee Rice for probably the first month at least of the NFL season, he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver potentially. And I think as long as he's out, he will continue to be a top 10/top 15 guy. So a very consistent flex/wide receiver 2 for your team is what Xavier Worthy will be for the first month to month and a half, depending on how long Rashee Rice is suspended. And even when he comes back, I think that Xavier Worthy serves a very good purpose as a good flex wide receiver in your fantasy team this year. Marvin Harris Jr., again, in this range, it makes me more comfortable to take him in an ESPN format. If it was T. Higgins in this range, I'd be all over him. But it's not T. Higgins. It's Marvin in an ESPN format going a full round later than T. Higgins, going a full round later than he is in underdog best ball drafts. I'm way more likely to pick Marvin here than I would be in an underdog best ball format. Breece Hall, James Conner, Baker Mayfield. I don't particularly love any of these picks right here. Breece Hall, I've had a lot of fears confirmed for me based on the first preseason game, which is that this team has talked all offseason about a 2-headed running back monster. Even a 3-headed running back monster. I mean, it's just not a good scenario here for a player that I think is an elite talent at the running back position. But the Jets aren't treating him like that. And it's a bummer for him. But I do like him a little over Connor because I have a very, very strong belief in Trey Benson this year, James Conner's backup. James Conner, a little bit injury prone, more on the injury prone side. He's dealt with a lot. He's an older running back, and I think Trey Benson is waiting in the wings to break out. So I just have less belief in Connor as a player than I do with Breece. And I think they'll both be in semi-shared backfields at some point during the season. So I'd rather take the more talented player. But Baker Mayfield, I think, is just too early. It's not that I don't think Baker won't be good in fantasy. I'd pick him over Mahomes, which we will go through here in a minute. But Baker Mayfield, to me, this is just way too early for him. This is an absurd draft price for Baker Mayfield. These quarterbacks in redraft this year, they're going really, really fast. And unless you get one of the top 4, or maybe even top 5 guys with Joe Burrow, I don't suggest going with a quarterback this early. It's just way too early. And with Patrick Mahomes, I honestly feel bad for people at this point. Like, if you are one of those people who is still picking Mahomes in a redraft league after what he's done the last 3 seasons to you, I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, this is just not a good move. Like, again, Mahomes in a, round 7, round 8, round 9 territory, I'd be all over him. I just think people would have figured it out at this point. He's not worth the investment where he's going right now. I think that's kind of end of story right there. He will disappoint once again, and the reason he's going this high in redraft leagues is obviously because of the name value. Don't fall for it. Now, in underdog formats here, again, the values are a lot different here. Kenneth Walker, I think, is a great pick in the 5th round. I think that this pick right here is a standout pick. Number 1, you get a good running back 2 if you went with 3 wide receivers in the first 4 rounds, and you get a good running back 2 in round 5, and this guy has tons of upside. I've discussed a lot. If Clint Kubiak has him for a full season, he's a top 5 running back. I love the upside with this. Cortland Sutton, James Cook, Jameson Williams, Devonta Smith. I also like all these picks as well. Sutton got a great quarterback this year. I see him being really good. James Cook, at the value you're getting him at right now, I think is really solid as well. Just needs to get back out there and practice. Jameson Williams, Devonta Smith. I like both of these players, actually. I've taken a lot more of Jameson than I have of Devonta Smith. But I'm actually fine with Devonta Smith at cost this year. I think with Jalen Hurts throwing the ball more this year, Devonta Smith will have some more big games than he did last year, for example. But I like all these players here, and I don't love DK Metcalf in this range. DK Metcalf, I've discussed a bunch of being Just a little bit of a better version of Pickens, but he still will disappear like George Pickens did in Pittsburgh. This offense led by Arthur Smith is just nothing you can rely on. So let me know which players you're targeting this year in fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 56 overall players in 2025 fantasy football this year, click on this video right here.